Well, let's get started. Good morning on the West Coast, afternoon in the Midwest, and afternoon and East. I see we have a couple of people in from Europe, so it's great to have you with us. Yeah, this is an education session. We have an education and then we do more advanced content. In 2 weeks, I'm going to go, for example, into how to do the right balance four-way express in great detail and show you why, for example, we put tape on the fingers. You can have your video on, but please mute your microphone. If your microphone is not muted, you will come up, your icon will, or avatar will come up on the screen and block whatever I'm discussing at the time. So please mute your microphones and we'll get started. Last time I was on, there was some confusion in terms of looking at prediction of the downswing path. And there are so many variables, and it's very important for us to revisit now before we go into today's content on the education. So very important for you to understand how to test each of the components of the setup and the golf swing, each of the fundamentals. So the first thing we looked at is, if you'll notice, I've done Right Balance Express. I'm on black 5 now, but you'll notice that no matter where I go, my hips are square. Okay. What we talked about was looking at all the original research. We saw this at address, which is an open hip line. All I did was increase the flex in my left knee. And we saw this, which is a closed hip line. I increased the flex, in my left knee, my right knee opens for me as a right-handed player. So the downswing path, even though I start square, and to test this, you have to begin square. Even though I start square, if I do, you'll notice how square I am. But when I swing to the top and I stop, look where my hips go. They open. And I'm going to show you why they open here in just a second. That is my downswing path. The only place to test it is from the top of the swing. So as I add knee flex, that's an over the top, that's left, or I'm going to hang back and block it to the right. So this is, the reason is I built the lower kinetic chain from the pelvis down before I built the upper kinetic chain pelvis up. So for example, if you're going into your setup and you get your grip and you get it at the address position, then you swing to the top, you'll notice that when I stop, my hips are square. At knee flex. If on the other hand, and there are multiple factors here, I'm just showing you've got to build the lower body, how to set your posture, how to get in your stance with all of those factors before you finalize your grip. So I hit my grip here. My hips look square at address. But when I swing to the top and come and stop, that's my downswing path. Okay. The other factors, so you want to build the bottom first. So I can go into my address position here. I get set. Now I get my grip. Now I turn to the top and I stand tall, add knee flex, and I'm square. And that's going to be my downswing path, which is what we're looking for. In the biomechanics lab, in the original research, we began to see players with a square hip line and address. But in the downswing, we saw an opening or closing of the hip line. And that was 20 years ago. So 15 years ago, as we began to look at those data, realized that the hips were opening or closing in the downswing. But there was nothing we could do to research it. research is as good as the variables you can control. So the hip line, once we eliminated the hip line, which is pretty simple to do, right balance express, I've eliminated the hip line. Now I can begin to test, and that's where the discovery came from. Now let's take a look at other factors now, just to give you an idea. So as we move forward, absolutely, everything you're going to be teaching, this is how you're going to validate and test. So if you want your students to have that path down the line, for example, I can set my grip, that's my grip for black 5. I can set my grip and have maximum rotation. I just showed you my carrying angle here. If I simply, let's get too much on top, I get stuck. I cannot make that backswing. So let's look at what happens from the side. So here is my good grip. Left hand, rotate back, I come back, and I'm squared. If I get a little bit too strong here, a little bit too much on top, hips still square here, rotate back, and I'm restricted in my rotation. Now look at my hips. So your grip, you can test your grip. That grip is going to cause me an over the top move. If, on the other hand, I have a good right hand, turn back, I'm square. Now let's add, or left hand, let's add the trail hand now. And turn back. And I'm good. But if I get a little bit under with that trail hand, watch my hips. A pretty decent backswing. When I come back, my hips just shut. That is a shallow approach to the ball. And that is a very thin shot. Now, everybody's going to be different. For me, my trail hand gets off, my hips close. You can have compensations. So the first thing I would suggest that you do in a lesson is determine what your student has. Just have them swing to the top and stop, stand tall, and they're good. To show you a couple more variables, if I'm in a mid-core. So if I'm in mid-core, there's my posture, and I rotate back. So the mid-core turns back everything together. We're going to cover this again toward the end of our session today in terms of sequencing of motion. Mid-core turns everything back together. I come back to square. Hips are good. But if my sequencing of motion is off, and I start, let's say, I start with my shoulders, which you'll see a lot of your students do. Start with the shoulders, restricting the hips. And when I come back, so if my sequencing of motion's off, that's my downswing path. That's such an important concept for you. So sequencing of motion, grip. Now here's my posture for my mid-core. And I am deep because I'm out to black 5. So my setup's going to be pretty deep. So I rotate back again, everything together, and I'm good. Okay? Stand tall, hips are square. However, this is my posture. If I simply get out of my posture a little bit, rotate my shoulders, I'm stuck in the backswing, and look where my hips are in the downswing. So posture, absolutely everything in your setup will change that downswing path. So we need to teach one segment at a time. First of all, you're going to have to obviously identify what the dominant core zone is, and all the factors that go into that setup for that core zone. From everything from posture to grip, stance width, sequencing of motion. But you can test each of those rather than now wondering, well, why was that over the top? That looks so good at setup. We can figure that out pretty simply. And you can work backwards. If you have a patient student, they'll work with you building it. So, but there's simple things your students can practice at home. So, the other thing we talked about, and I suggested incorrectly, what I suggested was absolutely wrong because I've tested myself, and that is grip. Okay. So we talked about This is a butterfly grip. All I'm doing is I have the same carrying angle on both sides. We'll get to a session, a deep session on carrying angle. But you saw that you've seen this in some of the other sessions. So if my carrying angle is set properly and my grip pitch, call it whatever you want to call it, but my grip is good, I'll have maximum rotation on both sides. However, this is a butterfly grip. And this is a complementary grip. All I'm doing is my palms are opposing. So if I turn here, now my hips are wide open. Let me show you the butterfly grip first. Here's my butterfly grip. Hips are square. So if I decide, oh, I want a complementary grip, turn back, and you can see my downswing path is going over the top, steep, fat, or block to the right. So what I determined in all 15, I tested all 15, remarkable for me to find that in my low core player, the butterfly grip showed up 3 out of 5 of these 5 subregions. So you want to test by subregion. And I'll show you now. For now, I use a butterfly grip. I think 4 out of 5 were butterfly grip in black, and something like 3 out of 5 were butterfly grip in upper anterior zone. And the reason I want to speak to this now is because last time I suggested, I believe because of the under position of the delivery of the ball in that low core player, they're going to be a complementary grip. Not so. And what you'll find, we'll get more into it when we get to grip, is that here's my butterfly grip. So if I have a good grip, a good posture, and I turn everything back together, when we use this clip, I see a very square. I see just the edge of the card, and I come back and I'm square. So I change one thing, just a little stronger right hand. Hips are still square at address. Club face looks very square, but my hips are wide open. So I got a false positive and an open hip line. So the downswing path is really we want to start, you can't do this you can't test without a square hip line. And I'll show you a little bit more how to do that without having to do the right balance express here.